This month, it marks the 50th anniversary of a groundbreaking moment in American history. Lyndon B. Johnson, he signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, legislation erasing the Jim Crow South and breaking down racial barriers that had segregated the country. Johnson made many moves behind the scenes to get the job done. He also did all that he could to hold on to his supporters, even if it meant interrupting Fannie Lou Hamer's speech at the Democratic Convention in 1964. Here's a look at a portion of that moment as featured in the PBS documentary Freedom Summer.
We was met in Indianola by policemen.
The president, Lyndon Johnson, he's not afraid of Martin Luther King's testimony. He's afraid of Fannie Lou Hamer's testimony. And so he decides that the country should not see her testify live.
Johnson is in the White House, and he convened an impromptu press conference.
We will return to this scene in Atlantic City, but now we switch to the White House and NBC's Robert Goralski.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
It was a fascinating time. Earlier today, I spoke more about this with Joshua Salmon. He's an expert on LBJ's presidency and also that chapter in American history. He is a political science professor at the University of New Haven. In terms of the man, we spoke recently to the documentarians behind the recent PBS special, The Freedom Riders.
Right.
And some of the audio tapes that were in there, they showed an LBJ that was far different from the let's say the signature signings to the legislation.
Yes.
How much of his fight for civil rights was a means to an end, and how much did he really believe in it? Because some of the language you got on tape wasn't exactly that of a bleeding heart.
No, it wasn't, but that is part of his persona of pandering. He had this pandering, he pandered to their bigotry and prejudice in order to get their vote, or not to have them so strenuously oppose what he was doing or filibuster.
So you think he really believed in voting rights because he believed in equity, or do you think he was doing it because he knew if I get more people to the polls, they're going to be voting my way?
No, he believed in equity, he believed in justice, and he believed that the time had come for civil rights to be recognized as a significant issue, and that African Americans had to be included in the greater society. And I think he really believed that. I heard of this same people being interviewed, and they played a clip of him talking. Michael Schwerner's widow, Rita, visited the White House. She wanted to seek justice for, to find the perpetrators. Sure. So she meets with LBJ. LBJ calls up J. Edgar Hoover, and Hoover tells him, he tells J. Edgar that Rita Schwerner has visited me. So Hoover said, she's a communist. And LBJ says, even worse, she's ugly and abrasive. He says, but anyway, I want you to get to the bottom of this is LBJ. So he pandered to him. He says, even worse, right?
Well,
this was LBJ, but in the end, you see, he knew how to get around Hoover.
He also knew how to get a deal done, and I guess my question is, we obviously have a very polarizing climate right now, and somebody asked a question that at first I dismissed out of hand, but then I thought about it and I said, you know what? I don't know. Could civil rights, just the basic Voting Rights Act of 1964, pass today?
Yes, with an effective president, with somebody with LBJ's personality and determination.
So you think you'd really have to sell it to the other side, even today in 2014?
Absolutely. And I don't think Obama has those qualities.
But that's a frightening testament, that you have to actually sell to let every American have a right to vote in this country.
That's right. You have to sell it you have to sell it to, not so much to the public, but to the opposition. You have to sell it to and I think that this is what's required. Reagan did it, FDR did it,
yep.
LBJ did it. Very few other presidents were able to match that, being an agent of change. And I really believe if we could reincarnate him and we could raise other issues, I think he would find a way. He would find a way to get there.
We talk about today the struggle to get things done, but also we're seeing, largely in the courts and at the state level, voting rights being chipped away bit by bit. And it's amazing to think that 50 years after the landmark legislation, depending where you are in this country, your ability to vote and the convenience of voting is being made harder and harder. It's really an amazing thing if people look at it in the aggregate rather than just one-offs.
Tuesday in the New York Times, there was a lead article in the Nation section about such an issue in North Carolina, Shelby, North Carolina, where they're trying to reduce the number of voting areas in an African American, largely African American district, from 5 to 2. And there's objection to that, and before that, that county needed pre-clearance. There were 9 states and several counties that needed what's called pre-clearance from the federal government. Once the Supreme Court said it's unconstitutional, then obviously, like you said, all these things came about, and also the voter ID. These are all ways to try to limit the amount of Democratic African Americans to suppress the vote. And I think that, so it just shows you how still relevant LBJ's legislative record is, whether it's the struggle against food stamps, right? Remember, we just saw that a few months ago, this reduction in food stamps, which was a major, as you put it, at the outset, it was a major assistance to those who were struggling to feed their families because of the loss of jobs, et cetera, in the Great Recession.
And maybe we end on this point, and I want to echo what you said earlier. If we look through the prism of history, for all the folks, and polling has shown that the public confidence in Washington, Congress especially, but even the office of the presidency is at near record lows.
Right.
It doesn't have to be this way. As intractable as it is, we've seen this chapter before in American history. There is a way to break through it, isn't there?
Yes, there is. There is a way to break through. And it all depends really on the ability of the president to become a one-of-us president. Reagan, after Carter, this was the problem, right? Remember the malaise, the Carter years, right? Reagan comes in.
Morning in America.
Right. Reagan comes in. It's Morning in America, right? It's a new morning in America. We're sitting on the Hill. He had an amazing ability. He was what we call a one-of-us president. He had ability to relate to everyone. And there's a famous quote of his. Someone asked him, why do people so much identify with him? He says, because I'm one of them. I've never separated myself from them. And that you need that type of president. You need that type of personality and leadership that would effectively do that. Or you need, or you also need an LBJ who can work around the legislative obstacles.
Professor, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Interesting date in history and interesting looking back.
Thank you very much.
We're going to take a quick commercial break, everyone. We come back, more RFL right after this.